Hello, hi everyone. Welcome back to Woo Can Cook. My name is Wesley, and this is a show where we are slowly cooking our way through all of the food from my childhood. Today we're diving back into our series dedicated to Korean comfort food classics with a shot at one of my absolute favorite quick dishes to throw together at the last minute, which is the Korean kimchi pancake or kimchijeon. For those unfamiliar, Kimchijeon is a Korean battered savory pancake that you'll commonly find in the small bites and shared plates section of a lot of Korean barbecue restaurants, particularly because it can be sliced up and eaten right off of the shared plate. Fancier versions of the Korean savory pancake may also see the use of seafood like squid or shrimp, but the kimchi version that we're making today is my personal favorite because it is essentially made from pantry scraps. This makes it an excellent option for late night 2 a.m. drunk meals, last minute appetizers, or really every time that you have ever been cooking a meal and realized that there's definitely not enough food for everyone. Most traditionally, a kimchijeon would be pan-fried in a skillet, not unlike how you would do a regular old pancake for breakfast, which is absolutely acceptable in my book. For our version today though, it occurred to me that the composition of our batter here is not too dissimilar to that of a Chinese egg foo young, which, as some of you may recall, we did a recipe for a little while back and discovered that it works really well when deep fried because the presence of egg in its batter causes the pancake to puff up pretty gloriously, which we will absolutely be experimenting with today as well. Okay, so let's get into it. Alright, so kicking things off here first, we're starting out with the veggies in our kimchi pancake today. This is going to be 4 cloves of crushed and minced garlic, followed by 1 inch or about 1 tablespoon of fine minced ginger. Next up is half of a medium sweet white onion that I'm removing the root and tip ends from, then slicing up thinly and breaking apart with my hands just to be thorough. If you've ever eaten a salad only to be greeted by an entire chunk of onion still stuck together, you'll know why this is important. Rounding out my veggies today are going to be 3 green onions that I'm also removing the root end from and slicing up into planks. Then I'm setting this all aside for a moment while we dive into our batter next. Okay, so if you're feeling lazy or drunk at 2 a.m., you can absolutely literally just dump all of this into a bowl and it will still probably work out okay. For our purposes today though, as with pretty much any time that we're working with batters, we're going to start off by combining our wet ingredients first before mixing in our dry. This is going to help prevent any lumps from forming in the batter since it will be a little bit easier to whisk. First up here is a single egg that I'm whisking up with a fork, followed by 4 tablespoons or a quarter cup of Korean chili paste or gochujang going in. Then rounding out my wet ingredients here is going to be a single cup of cold water plus about a quarter cup of kimchi brine, or in other words, the liquid that the kimchi is stored in. This is going to be the source of all of our briny, fishy umami goodness today. Depending on the age of your kimchi, plus, if you have used your kimchi brine for other things already too, I guess, you may or may not be able to squeeze this much brine out of your kimchi jar. So failing this, you can also just skip this step and that gochujang will carry the umami torch for you just fine as well. I'm giving this all a very thorough mix to combine until that gochujang has broken down and we're left with this nice smooth liquid here. Then finally, we're adding in a single cup of AP flour and whisking up until a smooth batter forms. Be thorough and actually use a whisk here because, as anyone that has ever eaten a lumpy pancake will tell you, lumps in your batter are just the worst. Finally, rounding this all out, I'm adding in my veggies to the batter. Here's my green onion, sweet white onion, garlic, ginger, and of course, last but not least, a single cup of kimchi going in. We're mixing this all up to combine, then setting it aside for a moment while we put together our dipping sauce next. Okay, so for the lazy folks out there, since I did after all promise a meal that you can throw together at 2 in the morning, you can absolutely skip this step and just eat this dish with soy sauce, but I personally think that a kimchi pancake pairs best with a slightly sweeter and brighter dipping sauce than what you would otherwise get with plain old soy sauce. So, going into my mixing bowl here first is 4 tablespoons or a quarter cup of soy sauce, followed by 2 tablespoons of brown sugar for some sweetness. Then next, if you are able to, this should be 2 tablespoons of kimchi brine for some brightness and acidity. If you're like me though and there's just no brine left in your jar, I'm gonna go ahead and use some rice vinegar here instead, which will absolutely work just fine as well. Rounding this all out is going to be a single tablespoon of sambal oelek for a tiny bit of heat to our sauce, followed finally by a tablespoon of sesame seeds to finish this all off. I'm mixing this all up to combine and we're heading over to the stove. Over on the stove, I've got my fryer heating up at 350 degrees F, then as promised, we're gonna take a page out of our egg fouillon recipe and attempt to deep fry our pancakes here. For those shy about deep frying though, you can of course simply pan fry these in a skillet for about 2 minutes per side, and you've got yourself a perfectly acceptable kimchijeon, which for what it's worth is also how you'll more commonly come across this dish in most restaurants as well. For those still with me here though, we're venturing onward with our deep fry. The challenge here, as you can imagine, just as with our egg fouillon, is mainly going to be about making sure that our batter doesn't completely fall apart as soon as it hits the oil, since obviously there is nothing really holding it together. This is a very liquid batter after all. So I'm using my ladle here to very gently spoon in our mixture and letting it set as soon as it hits the oil. You'll notice that the egg in our batter is going to immediately cause the pancake to puff up with air, allowing for it to float, like so. I'm giving this about 2 minutes per side until nice and crisp, then removing it with a spider and setting it on a dry rack to cool while we repeat with our remaining batter. I'm serving this all up with a side of dipping sauce to finish, and we're ready to eat. Okay, so first off, I'll start out by reiterating that pretty much any time that I'm feeling lazy and I don't feel like cooking, this is basically the #1 go-to dish that I make pretty much every single time. It's quick and painless, you can assemble it all in about 5 minutes, there's very minimal cleanup to do, and of course, best of all, pretty much everything that we used here are likely things that are already in your pantry or refrigerator. I've been skillet frying kimchi pancakes like this since I was in college on a hot plate in a dorm room, and it definitely still holds up. For those doing the extra credit deep fry though, I'm here to tell you that it absolutely also checks out. The egg in our batter causes the pancake to almost aggressively puff up into these wild, wonderfully chaotic shapes, which are not only puffy and soft, but also create all of these nice exposed edges to crisp up on the sides as well. The result is a puffy, crispy, umami-packed pancake that is genuinely unlike any kimchi pancake that I have ever had. Finally, the last bit that I'll mention is that the dipping sauce here took, I don't know, an extra 2 minutes to put together, and I think it makes a world of difference. The extra brightness and sweetness that we've created pairs nicely with the gochujang and kimchi brine in our pancake that I think would be lacking if you were to eat this simply with soy sauce. Okay, so that's it everyone. I hope you enjoyed this and I hope you give this one a shot. For those who are new to the channel, this one is part of a larger series dedicated to classic Korean dishes, so definitely check out that series next if you haven't yet, because there's a lot of these. For the Bay Area locals, the Woo Can Cook Fried Rice Pop-Up is back at 2 Pitchers Brewing in Oakland this weekend, so come by and say hi if you can. More about that at woocancook.com/eats. As always, like, comment, subscribe, share, be nice interneters, and I'll see you soon.